Hello there, thank you so much for stopping by. My name is ChitChat and welcome back to another episode of Planet Coaster, where we are working on the Chatterbox Studio theme park. Today we're going to continue building in the Banjo and Kazooie area of the theme park as we work on a new flat ride as well as a new shop. So let's go ahead and get started. So this flat ride is a combination of ideas and suggestions that were brought up in previous episodes, and I'm really excited to implement it in this area of the park just to kind of fill out some of the open space that we have, and that was to use the teacup ride and turn it into almost like cauldrons, because there's a couple of quick travel cauldrons, fast travel cauldrons in the first game. And there's also a main character cauldron that Grunty, the villain, uses that actually ends up sort of helping you towards the end of the game. So we're going to use that aesthetic with the teacups. Unfortunately, with some of the flat rides and even the coasters, there are just some parts of the design that you're not able to modify or change the colors of just due to the selection that they give you. So unfortunately we couldn't get the exact aesthetic that we were going for with the cauldrons, but I think we got pretty close to it, at least enough to kind of suspend the disbelief, and that's what it's supposed to be. The other idea was to make this a click clock wood section of this area of the park, which for those of you that aren't familiar with Banjo and Kazooie or the click clock wood level, and I know I talked about this on the previous episode, but just in case you didn't watch that one or forgot about what we were talking about with Click Clock Wood, the level is split up into 4 different sections. And it's essentially like the level is duplicated 4 times with just some slight alterations. And those alterations mainly revolve around the different seasons. So things that you could do in summer, you couldn't necessarily do in winter, like there's a beehive that you could go into, and I think if it's either fall or summer, or no, it's spring and summer, there'll be like bees or maybe they're hornets or something like that inside that are active, and there are like missions that you can do while you're in there. But if you go in there during December, they won't be there. So it's a really interesting design for a level, and it certainly makes things interesting. And there are some missions that carry on over the different seasons. One in particular, which I think I discussed on the last episode, is hatching an egg, and you have to carry it through all the way through the different seasons. So it's a really interesting level, and certainly a clever way of, I guess, repurposing the design of a level or the layout of the level, because I'm assuming the technology of the N64 was fairly limited in storage capacity. So being able to get this major level out of basically the same geometry, just reskinning it 4 different times, I assume was done for like a technical reason, and it's a creative way to solve that if that is the case. So I'm quite a fan of that, when design kind of meets function and the creative process kind of comes from that. I can't tell you how many projects that I've been on where the limitations can sometimes give you almost a freedom. And it's really weird because like it essentially tells you what you can't do, right? So then you can kind of explore, okay, well, what can I do? And in those ways, you might be able to come out with a more solidified process or a more solidified design aesthetic or an idea, because you know what you can and can't do. Because sometimes the blue sky thought, which is just like the open-ended spectrum, can be really challenging, because when someone tells you, oh, you could just do whatever you want, well, you're just like, well, crud, where do I start? If I could just do whatever I want, well, then where do I go? Like, where do I go from there? And so sometimes working with some limitations might actually be like a fun creative challenge. And I'm more or less referring to this in the manner of being in a creative industry as a video editor and animator full-time. I often am working with clients that have already established brand guides or already established like videos that we have to kind of base ours around and just try and like match the style but still elevate it in the way that we do. So I personally find it really cool when that sort of engineering aspect of, you have to work in this bubble, but you can be creative in that bubble almost. And that's, I think, why I like these kind of games like Planet Coaster, because you're given a video game where you have these sort of limitations, but building inside those limitations can sometimes be really fun and rewarding, because you might be able to discover a way of doing things that might not necessarily be what the game intended for you to do, but you can still do it. A fun example comes to mind in, I think it was Halo 3. This is like, this is going to be a throwback. So in Halo 3, I believe is when they introduced the Forge mechanic, which was the map builder. And in that, there was, for the longest time, you couldn't intersect objects into each other because they were solid. They considered them collision-based objects. So you weren't able to like intersect things into each other. Well, people found out that you were able to put a timer on these objects for when they should spawn. And in doing that, you could reload the map builder and go in and place a new object in the same spot or near the same spot before that other object spawned. Therefore, when it spawned, it would then intersect. So people started coming up with these crazy maps because they basically found a loophole, you know, through this being a limitation, found a loophole with that limitation, and then were able to be, you know, crazy and creative. And I'm not sure, it's been a long time since I've, you know, hardcore jumped into a Halo title, not since Halo Reach, but I'm not sure if like the new map makers that they have out there just foregone that whole limitation, or if that's still something people do to this day. I just found it really entertaining that, you know, people just find a way. Like in Planet Coaster, for the longest time, you weren't able to import 3D objects or custom skinned objects or anything like that. So people just found a way. You know, like what I do when I create, you know, these 3-dimensional characters just using the shapes. You know, I realistically can't 3D model everything that I want to build in this game, nor would I want to, but for the things that I need, like the Bowser one that I just recently did, like I had a lot of fun just building that out of shape. So finding a way around what you're given is sometimes really rewarding, and kind of plays into the one question that I got in the previous video, and I want to, let's see if I can find it. So this user's name is really funny. It's called they're called Kermit's right kneecap.
Oh no, not my right kneecap, that's my favorite.
They ask, this looks really good. I just got the console edition of the game, just because their computer isn't great with video games. So they were wondering if I could give some tips to make a park look real, aesthetic, and beautiful. Thank you so much for the comments.
In Kermit's right kneecap, I didn't know that you were a sentient kneecap, but now I'm learning things about myself that I wasn't sure of before.
So I feel like that kind of plays into what we were just talking about a little bit, and I'm certainly not going to, you know, sit here and be like, oh, you should do things this way or that way, because this is a game that just lets you do so much, and there's so many different design principles and just ideas that you're able to create because of this and flourish with. But I do really like spending time looking at how real theme parks and the real world are kind of laid out and structured. And it's really interesting to especially look at them from a Google Maps perspective, where you can see things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see otherwise. You can kind of see how these show buildings are actually constructed and how much space a lot of them actually occupy that you really don't notice because you're only seeing the facades of them. You're only seeing like the front of a lot of these buildings. So for example, just recently with the new Mario Park at Universal, or the Mickey's Runaway Railway at Disney's Hollywood Studios, or soon to be at Disneyland in Toontown, the show building for those rides, like the Mario Kart ride and the Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, it's huge, it's enormous, but you don't know that because you really can't see it from your perspective. So seeing the Google Maps like top-down view of theme parks is really enlightening, and you can kind of see too an easier way of like looking at the layout. So some parks really don't have much of an aesthetically pleasing layout. Like I think of a lot of the Magic Mountain, you know, style, you know, parks where there's just like a lot of empty space between large walking paths. But then you look at others like Epcot, or you know, the original Disneyland, or the Universal parks with Islands of Adventure. Like there's a very specific way that they're laid out. They have a very specific like port of entry. They have a hub where everything kind of connects to, and just looking at those and kind of getting an idea of what would just flow really, really well. I can't tell you what an enormous difference it made when, especially at Disneyland, like when we entered Batuu, aka Galaxy's Edge, aka Black Spire, aka Star Wars Land, the park, the section of the park with a billion names, the aesthetic just in the pathways, it made a huge difference. So you think of like Disneyland, it was built in a time where, you know, they weren't thinking about like these just massive crowds that are now, you know, obviously not now being that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but in under normal circumstances, like they just didn't plan for those large crowds. So a lot of the pathways are very narrow, and, you know, they've had to widen here and there as much as they can, but a lot of stuff is built, so there's not a whole lot they can do. When you enter in Batuu, suddenly the paths are much, much wider, and things are much more spaciously laid out and have a very dynamic path. So if like you're going into the store area, you know, the stores are all kind of interconnected with each other that lead you to some of the higher end stores, like the I'm forgetting the Ankar's collectors, like area where you can get the Kyber crystals and some of the higher priced items. That leads you down the stairs where you can see the Millennium Falcon. From the Millennium Falcon, you can see the I think the cantina is right next to that, and then from the cantina you can see the droid depot. From the droid depot you can see the Imperial outpost. So there's just like everything connects you to the next experience, and it's just really well thought out. In terms of rides, honestly, like just watching POVs of even rides that I've been on like a million times, seeing them from a POV video just can help you get ideas. And what I really like is like especially with how really good some of these phone cameras are getting. People are getting some really beautiful like low light videos of some of the old dark rides, or even some of the, you know, current dark rides, and you're able to see these details that you might not even be able to see in person. I can think just recently when I was watching a POV video, and I'm gonna look them up real quick because I don't want to get the name wrong. Yes. The channel called SoCal Attractions 360 is the channel name. They have some of the best low light POV videos of rides that I have ever seen. And I, for the longest time, and I've talked about this in lengths on the channel, but I wanted to know everything and anything about the new Jurassic World ride at Universal Studios Hollywood, because like that ride is so ingrained into my brain, at least the original version of it. Like it lives rent free in my brain. So I wanted to know everything about it. And their video was one of the first ones that came out. And having gone on that ride since, there is stuff in there that you cannot see with your eye that these low light cameras are able to see. So that too also gives you an idea of how these things are laid out, what things are actually built and what things are actually almost nothing. Like, especially like the old Disney rides, like the old Disneyland rides in Fantasyland, so much of those attractions are just really decent, like really good lighting, and then just like black plywood for so many sections of the scenes, because that's not what they want you to look at. The lighting really dictates how you perceive your environment. So you even see that being practiced with some of the newer attractions. Like one that I can think of is the dinosaur attraction at Disney's Animal Kingdom. That ride is so incredibly dark, but they light the scenes that they want you to look at. Everything else is pretty much non-existent. So if you kind of take that idea, you don't necessarily have to build rides that are just completely flourished in all this detail. If you don't want them to see all of that detail, because again, you're going to have to build all that. So things that can help make you feel a little bit more realistic is just to light scenes in a way that would direct their attention. So some of the stuff in the Luigi's Mansion ride that I've been building, like I'm not decking out the entirety of the interior of the mansion. I'm just decking out small sections and small parts. And then the rest of them are just kind of the base, building materials. And the lighting is really going to dictate what people are going to look at and what I actually spend my time on. So there's all these little things that you can do. I think just being inspired by a particular subject matter, like for example, I really am digging working on this Banjo-Kazooie section of the park because I'm playing it with my friend Dustin. We're having a really good time. And it seems like some of y'all are interested in Banjo and Kazooie now, which is really cool. I'm glad that I, can give that suggestion, because it is a really fun game. But what I like about it is that there's all these really fun design elements that I can kind of get inspired with, and combine that with, real things like the Super Mario theme park that's in Japan right now. I can look at how they just handled a humongous game IP and how they translated that into the real world, and just find things that inspire you, build something that makes you happy. That's all I can really say. Just find something that you're going to enjoy investing a lot of hours in, because Planet Coaster can be very meticulous sometimes, and just be prepared for the time commitment that it can take. And I'm glad that you're able to jump into the console version of the game. I'm hearing, at first I wasn't hearing great things because of like a build item limit. I heard there was kind of problematic, but also that it might have been solved by now. But it's cool that, people are able to enjoy the console experience. I actually recently downloaded the Jurassic World Evolution on console, and I gotta say, I actually enjoy playing that game on console more than I enjoy playing it on PC. There are some games that I just want to like sit back on the couch and not have to be in front of a computer monitor for, mostly because my day-to-day life is just staring at a computer monitor endlessly. I can't tell you what a relief it can be, especially now that I'm working from home. It's a relief to not be in the same room for all hours of the day, as weird as that sounds. So being able to play, a game that I enjoyed on PC, if I can re-download it and just, sit on the couch, and I know I'm still staring at a screen, but really it's just changing your environment, even as something as small as going from your office to the living room. Like, in the state of the world right now, I'll take what I can get in terms of changing up my environment. But I've been enjoying playing that game a lot on console. And I've been enjoying the heck out of playing Banjo and Kazooie with my buddy Dustin. I think as of recording this, the last episode we got to Freezy Peaks, which is one of my favorite levels, minus the horrific snowmen that occupy that level. Once they're gone, it's a pretty fun experience, but my gosh, those snowmen haunt me. I can just hear the laughter followed by a when they throw a snowball, and they have such precision with those freaking snowballs. Like, if y'all never played Freezy Peaks, and you decide to play Banjo and Kazooie, just be prepared, man, because that level is haunting, and there's only one way to defeat those enemies. So good luck, because all you can do is fly homing attack them, and it doesn't have the best, at least in my mind, doesn't have the best way of targeting. So you could be just slightly off, and you're gonna have a bad time. So I should probably explain what I'm doing here. So there was a character in Banjo and Tooie, I believe, that you could get extra honeycomb pieces from, and she was like a queen bee character. And honeycombs just play a huge part in, both the main Banjo and Kazooie games, and that if you collected enough, you would extend your health meter. So I thought that the honeycomb aesthetic would be a fun thing to create a sweet shop with. Originally, I just had this long building that wasn't really themed, and I thought, maybe this would be a better opportunity to have something that's has a bit more character to it, and we could maybe have some kind of interaction between this and the main attraction. So you can see this has a relatively open back half to it, and maybe we can place another character on top of that you could see from the log ride. Or I am thinking about adding another attraction in this land. There is a coaster in this game that's I think it's supposed to be like a stork. I think it would be fun to kind of think of that as a Kazooie ride, and it would almost be just like a travel ride. It's not going to have any sort of real thrills to it. It's just to kind of take you around this land, much in the vein of the Yoshi style attraction in the new Mario land in Universal Studios in Japan. There's not a whole lot to it. It has, I think, only one interior section, dark ride section, with a couple of cutesy animatronics. So I was really wanting to have something that kind of explores this land, because I don't know, there's just like a lot of really interesting things going on with it, with the spiral mountain that like leads you into it, and then with the Gruntilda's lair. I just feel like there's a fun opportunity to have a ride that's kind of up high, so you can kind of get more of the view of the land, which I think the Yoshi style attraction is like primarily what it's being used for, is just to kind of carry you around this experience that they've built with all of these, you know, animatronics that are just going at all times, you know, like they put all this work into it. So I feel like that ride is really just meant to, you know, help you take it all in and see all of it from a higher perspective, which, you know, it's kind of cool. That's why I love the People Mover so much. The original People Mover at Disneyland, RIP. For those of you that don't know, because it is still around in the Magic Kingdom, the Florida version, the People Mover has been gone from the original Disneyland longer than, God, I can't even remember. And I loved the People Mover. I was the kid that loved the People Mover. I don't care how slow it was or how quote unquote boring it was. I loved it. I thought it was such a fun little ride. And I'm also the kind that would ride the railroad multiple times. Like if I'm tired, and if I just want like a mint julep and just to chill for a little bit, I'll just get on the train and ride it multiple times. I don't care how many times I'm going to go to the Grand Canyon and then somehow go into the land of the dinosaurs. Like, I'm all for it. It's a good time. And to wrap things up, we're just going to do a couple of interior designs. Going to add some more honeycomb pieces to kind of just flush out some of these empty walls. Didn't want to do anything too crazy or over the top, just because if I theme one interior, I'm going to have to theme all of them. But, you know, they're just honeycomb pieces, so it wasn't super difficult to make, and it does help bring this area out just a little bit. And I do want to make some signage for this area of the park, so I'll likely be doing some drawings at some point and just doing some artwork for Banjo and Kazooie, which will be fun because I haven't drawn those characters in so long, so it'll be a good time drawing those guys again. And speaking of People Movers, we're going to move on out of here because it is the end of today's episode. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this content and you want to watch more like it, check out the Let's Play series with my buddy Dustin, where we were playing the original Banjo and Kazooie game. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will chat with you on the next episode.